Will you marry me? When I was struggling with harassment from someone, the woman who lived next door said this to me. Her name is Nora. She lost her husband a few years ago. Nora has always been kind and helpful to me. However, it seems she has also been harassed by someone. To solve this problem, she wants to marry me. Alright, let's get married. I accepted her proposal, and Nora and I became husband and wife. We continued to live our days as usual, but during a hot spring trip, we discovered a shocking truth. Later, the person who had been harassing us was finally revealed. In the end, he fell into ruin. I'm sure he won't bother us again from now on. My name is Tom. I'm almost 60, a man who loves gardening. I had been preparing for my upcoming birthday in a month, which I had hoped to celebrate with my wife of 40 years, Emily. We are the same age and have birthdays close together, so I was looking forward to celebrating with her. But just a few months ago, Emily passed away. It wasn't due to an accident or any kind of incident. She simply returned to heaven in accordance with the natural order, but it was too sudden. She had been completely healthy the day before she passed, so I couldn't quite process it. Hey, let's go shopping together tomorrow. We're out of butter in the fridge. All right. I'll grab some milk too, since we're running low. We were making plans to shop like that, so there was no way I could have expected it. Even now, a few months after her passing, I still can't accept the reality that she's gone. Cooking for just one person, going shopping, all the things remind me of her absence. It will probably take me a long time to get used to this. Luckily, I have my gardening hobby, and I'm busy training the younger employees at work, so I have things to keep me occupied. I can only hope that while I stay busy, the pain of losing Emily will gradually fade. Though it will be a long time from now, make sure you take good care of the garden even after I'm gone. Of course. I enjoy taking care of the garden and the flowers. But hey, there's a chance I'll go before you, and if that happens, make sure you manage the garden well, okay? Yes, I know. Thanks to promises like this, I've been able to avoid sinking into despair. So even after Emily passed, my days didn't change much outwardly. However, it seems that God has decided to give me another challenge to overcome. Lately, someone has been harassing my house with various nuisances. I need to find a way to stop this. Cleaning up the garbage dumped at my door and removing the offensive notes left on the door have become daily chores. One early morning, as I was leaving for work, I heard a voice from the garden of the house next door. Good morning, Tom. Have a good day today. Thank you, Nora. Her name is Nora. She lost her husband in an accident a few years ago. She's in her 40s, about 20 years younger than me, and she's known around the neighborhood as a beautiful woman. Perhaps because she also lost a spouse, she often shows concern for me, as my wife Emily passed away too. We both share a love for gardening, which has brought us closer. She frequently gives me tips on how to care for flowers or how to spread fertilizer. Just the other day, she told me all about using kitchen waste as fertilizer. She's also helped me deal with occasional pests and shared some time-saving cooking methods, which has been a big help. It's a beautiful day today. Yesterday's downpour must have been tough, right? Yes, even with an umbrella, my clothes got soaked, and it was pretty cold. Nora calls me by my first name. That's because she used to chat frequently with my late wife, Emily. Nora's husband, David, was a quiet man. He passed away in his 30s, and from what I remember, he was the reserved type. He didn't talk much, preferring to listen to others instead. So, whenever we conversed, it was almost always just with Nora. She often brings up the topic of the neighborhood's safety. By the way, I've heard that a suspicious person has been seen lurking around here lately. Please be careful. Thank you for the concern. You should be careful as well. Living alone as a woman can be tough. Yes, thank you, too. Since David passed away, Nora, who was once a full-time housewife, started working part-time. She works at the local grocery store like many other housewives, but sometimes she comes home late, which worries me. Nora, has anything strange been happening around your place lately? No, everything's been fine. I've heard rumors, but nothing out of the ordinary. I asked her this, recalling the recent harassment at my place. I wondered if her house had been targeted too, but she assured me that nothing had happened. That's good to hear. Well then, I'd better head to work. All right, have a good day. After exchanging pleasantries, I left for work. I'm eager to catch the culprit behind the harassment, but with a full-time job, I can't stake out the house. Maybe it's time to buy a security camera and install it by the front door. After about half an hour of commuting, I arrived at work and went about my day as usual. But at some point, I started to feel as if someone was watching me. I also felt a slight chill. At first, I thought I might be coming down with a cold, but I was functioning fine at work, so that didn't seem to be the case. Is it just my imagination, or is someone watching me? I couldn't shake the feeling, so I glanced around several times. But I never caught anyone's eye, and I couldn't pinpoint the source of the feeling. Puzzled, I continued working until the end of the day when a younger colleague approached me. Tom, do you want to grab a drink after work today? His name is Mike. He's in his 40s, and I've been mentoring him since he first joined the company. He's good-looking and has a great personality. He's quite popular within the company, but there's never any talk of him dating anyone. I sometimes ask him about his love life, thinking he might have a crush on someone, but he never gives anything away. Still, he's fairly sociable, especially with other guys. That's probably why he often invites me out for drinks after work. He likely just wants someone to vent his work frustrations to. But today, I can't accept his offer. As I mentioned before, I won't be able to go out for drinks for a while. I'm sorry you went out of your way to ask, but ever since Emily passed, I just haven't been in the mood for it. I understand. It can't be helped. But even after she's gone, do you still love your wife, Tom? Yeah, I do. Emily was a great woman. From the time we started dating, she's always been by my side, supporting me. As I spoke fondly of Emily, various memories flooded my mind. Our first date, our wedding day, and many other moments. All of which brought back a sense of happiness. But the next thing Mike said caught me off guard. If you love your wife that much, I guess you won't be getting remarried, huh? I bet your wife up in heaven would get jealous if you did. I'm quite old now. At 60, I imagine very few people think about remarrying. It's not unheard of, but it's not something most people would do. Besides, I hadn't mentioned having feelings for anyone else, so I found his comment a bit strange. Why did he bring that up? I silently wondered about it but chose to agree with him. Yeah, that's right. I'm devoted to Emily. When he heard this, he looked somewhat relieved, though I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination. Oh, by the way, yesterday, Ken mentioned he got a new phone, so you'll need his new number. You were in the restroom when he said it. That happened while I was away? Thanks for letting me know. Ken is our manager. I took the note from his hand and checked what was written on it. Mike's handwriting is a bit quirky, making it slightly hard to read, but since the note only contained a name and some numbers, it wasn't difficult. However, something about the handwriting seemed oddly familiar, and it lingered in the back of my mind. Later that night, when I got home from work, I noticed several posters had been stuck to the front door. Each one contained insults directed at me. Since tomorrow is trash day, I decided to gather all the trash together, so I started peeling them off. I went inside the house and combined them with the household trash into one garbage bag. But before that, I decided to take a closer look at the posters. I thought there might be some clue that could lead to the culprit. The posters were just ordinary A4-sized white sheets. It's the kind of paper often used in offices. The notes said things like, "Move out and don't get married." I'm not sure what to do. I was thinking of waiting a bit longer before contacting the police, but this is starting to get scary. Muttering to myself, I tried to piece together who might be behind this. Getting the police involved was one option, but there was no guarantee they'd find the culprit. They're busy, and if the case landed in the hands of someone who wasn't diligent, they might not investigate thoroughly. The key detail was the timing. The harassment always occurred twice a day, once in the early morning and once in the evening. If I could figure out who passes by the house at those times, I could narrow down the suspects. A security camera would help gather that information. I guess I should go buy one this weekend. With that thought in mind, I planned my next move. Aside from the timing, the harassment consisted of two main types: scattered garbage and offensive notes. While the garbage was random, the content of the notes could provide a clue about who harbored ill feelings toward me. From the note about moving out, it sounds like someone's upset about a neighborhood issue. But Nora hasn't mentioned anything. And the house on the other side is vacant. As I pondered over the notes, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Nora standing there. She looked anxious and said, "I need to talk to you." I invited her in and offered her some tea. Though she had looked tense at the door, her expression softened a bit once she sat down. I wondered what had happened to cause her distress. As I was thinking about this, she began to speak. "Actually, there's a man who's been persistently coming on to me lately. I don't have any feelings for him, but he keeps asking me to marry him. When I refuse, he stands outside my door for hours, and it's becoming a real problem." That sounds tough. I'm sorry to hear you've been going through that. I felt sympathy for her as she looked distressed. I was sure her late husband still held a place in her heart. Having someone she didn't care for coming onto her must have been nothing but a burden. If someone did that to me, after just losing Emily, I'd hate it too. As I worried about her, Nora made an unexpected proposal. "So, well, I know this might be an inconvenience, but could you please consider what I'm about to ask? It would just be an arrangement on paper. Nothing more." After a brief pause, she looked at me seriously and said, "Will you marry me?" Her words left me speechless. In other words, she was suggesting a sham marriage to fend off the unwanted suitor. But agreeing to this felt like a betrayal of Emily. Still, I couldn't just leave Nora, who had always been so kind to me, in distress. What should I do? As I stood frozen, Nora continued, "We don't have to live together, and we don't need to have a wedding. If you find it hard to believe me, I'll give you something very personal as proof: my private diary." "What?" With a desperate look on her face, she handed me the diary, saying she had brought it from her house. It was a rather thick diary, probably several hundred pages long. It's filled with things I would never want anyone to know: complaints about people, feelings I've kept hidden when I was upset. A lot of personal stuff. If I ever do anything disrespectful to you, feel free to reveal it. So, will you please consider marrying me? She knew she was making an unreasonable request and seemed deeply sorry for asking. When I looked at her, it was clear that she genuinely felt bad about putting this burden on me. With her going to such lengths, I found it impossible to refuse. All right, let's get married. After silently apologizing to Emily in my heart, I accepted her proposal. 6 months passed. Our lives didn't change much from before. Even though we had filed the marriage paperwork, we stayed out of each other's way as much as possible. However, since we had let people know about the marriage, our neighbors found it curious. Tom and Nora got married, but they don't seem that close. Yeah, you'd think they'd be living together, but they're still in separate homes. The neighborhood housewives and others were gossiping like this. But I didn't care about the chatter around me. As long as Nora wasn't being harassed by that man anymore, that was all that mattered. Nora, has that man stopped bothering you? Yes, thanks to you. But to make sure the lie doesn't get exposed, could you keep this up a little longer? I was relieved that our plan had worked. However, some people saw my remarriage as a betrayal of Emily. How could he remarry so soon after his wife passed? I bet he was cheating on her while she was still alive. He seemed like such a devoted husband, but maybe he wasn't so clean when it came to women. I had my own thoughts about those comments, but Nora defended me, which helped ease the frustration. You always cherished Emily, and it's awful for people to say such things. But I suppose this is partly my fault, too. I'm sorry. It's all right, don't worry about it. I have no regrets. Even though Nora was the one who initially proposed this, it was ultimately my decision to agree. So I had no intention of blaming her. We would continue living the way that suited us best. One day, Nora won a pair of tickets to a hot spring trip in a raffle. It was for two, and she didn't want to waste them, so she invited me to join her. On her day off, she came by to share some vegetables from her garden and handed me the tickets. What do you think? It would be a shame to let them go to waste. I don't have anyone else I'd want to travel with, and of course, we can have separate rooms. When Nora said that, I hesitated for a moment. Emily came to mind, but I couldn't ignore the slightly anxious look on Nora's face. So, I agreed to go on the hot spring trip with her. All right, let's go together. But, you don't seem to be in the best mood. Yeah. Actually, that person has been approaching me again recently. Nora sighed heavily and explained the situation in more detail. The man who had been harassing her half a year ago hadn't been around for a while. But recently, he'd started coming on to her again. I wondered what might have happened. Then it occurred to me that the harassment at my house started again around the same time. After I remarried Nora, the harassment had stopped completely, but recently, it had begun again. Could it be connected somehow? That's scary. Don't you think you should tell the police? Yes, I'm planning to. But they don't always act quickly, do they? I want to do what I can on my own. I understood her reasoning. I'd thought the same thing half a year ago. After installing surveillance cameras, the person harassing us stopped coming to the house, but it's best to do whatever we can on our own. Unless things get out of hand. Let's make sure to show everyone how close we are on this trip. Let's create a lot of memories and spread the word when we get back. Thinking about it that way, I'm starting to get a little excited. Me too. You've always taken care of me, so I'm happy to help in any way I can. Thank you, Tom. With the plan set, I immediately started preparing for the trip. I hoped that by the end of this trip, the person causing us trouble would realize the futility of his actions. A few days later, we boarded the bullet train and headed to our destination. We made the most of the 2-day itinerary. The first day was spent visiting tourist spots together and creating memories until we were exhausted. The second day, we relaxed by touring hot springs, taking care of our bodies. Nora is still in her 40s, but I'm in my 60s. I can't push myself too hard, so I took it easy. I'm an old man now, so if there's somewhere you want to go, don't worry about me and enjoy yourself. I can't do that. I wouldn't enjoy myself if I left you behind. I'll stay and spend time with you too. During the trip, Nora and I shared the same room. We've known each other long enough to trust one another. I didn't think anything would happen that would betray Emily. A 2-day trip went smoothly itself. The trip was going smoothly, without any trouble at all, but on the last night, an unexpected incident occurred. While Nora was changing her clothes in our room, I accidentally opened the door. At that moment, I caught sight of something shocking. There were painful-looking scars etched across her back. "You saw, didn't you?" she said with a wry smile as she finished changing. The scars on my back were from a man I dated 20 years ago. With a sad expression, she explained that the man had recently been asking her to get back together. When I first married David, he seemed to have given up. But I guess that wasn't the case. When my husband died in the accident, he must have seen it as his chance. He kept pestering me until I remarried you. Nora's body trembled as she stared off into the distance. I still dream about that time sometimes. It's terrifying. I wake up in a panic. She was probably recalling those painful memories. Her voice began to tremble as she wrapped her arms around herself, looking vulnerable. He was a horrible man who would hit me whenever he was upset. But when I told him I had remarried, it felt a little satisfying. His face turned completely pale. Nora let out a small chuckle, then bowed her head toward me. "Thank you for giving me the chance to get back at him. And thank you so much for indulging my selfish wish to get remarried." I scratched my head, feeling a bit embarrassed. I had no idea that Nora had such a complicated past. As I looked at her, I felt something stirring within me. A feeling I had been trying to suppress, an affection for her. I wanted to be there for her, to support her through the pain she carried. The desire to protect her and stand by her side grew stronger. She had been through so much, fighting to live her life while haunted by the shadows of her past. I found myself wanting to help her more, to be her support in any way I could. I opened my mouth to tell her how I felt. But before I could say anything, her phone rang, interrupting the moment. She apologized to me and answered the call. Almost immediately, her face turned pale. "You followed us all the way here? This is insane." It was clear she was in some kind of argument. I noticed that Nora's face had gone pale. It seemed like something serious had happened. When she hung up, I asked, "What's wrong?" "The man who's been harassing me. He's here. At this inn." "What?" "Apparently, he's been watching us from a distance the whole time. He's completely lost it, and he's demanding that I get back together with him." Nora was trembling. I gently rubbed her back to comfort her. What should I say to her, who has been living in fear of her ex-boyfriend and enduring it all this time? After thinking for a moment, I decided to take a bold approach. This is the perfect chance. Let's show him how strong our bond is. Once he sees that, he'll have no choice but to give up. "Do you really think so?" "Yes. Don't worry. I'll protect you, no matter what happens." As I spoke to her with confidence, she smiled, looking relieved. After that, I invited Nora to take a walk around the inn. We walked hand in hand, sometimes linking arms. After that phone call, if someone saw us getting along like this, they would surely be driven mad with jealousy and show up right away. Soon, I began to feel the weight of someone's gaze. That feeling was familiar to me. I had experienced it from time to time at the office. Could it really be? The thought crept into the back of my mind. After Emily's passing, during the busy days of the funeral, I spent a lot of time alone at home. During that time, I became overly sensitive to visitors, as if my sixth sense was kicking in. Now, I was more aware of someone's presence than ever before. Tom, I looked back earlier, and I saw him. What should we do? It's okay. I'm here with you. As I suspected, that man must be nearby. After walking for a while, the man approached us from behind and overtook us. Then, he blocked our path, standing right in front of us. He was wearing sunglasses and a mask. He looked to be in his 40s, about the same age as Nora. I thought there was no reason to wear sunglasses indoors, but maybe it was part of his disguise. I can't believe you'd cheat on me with another man. And with him of all people. I can't stand it. It became clear that the person in front of us was someone with a very obsessive personality. Speaking rapidly in an agitated state, his words rushed out. I recognized that voice, and the realization shocked me. I stepped in front of Nora and faced him directly. I can't believe it. So the man who's been stalking Nora, it's you, Mike. He must have thought there was no longer any point in hiding. Mike took off his sunglasses, revealing his face, and scowled at me. I suddenly recalled the handwriting on the notes that had been left at my front door. I had found something familiar about it, and now I realized it closely resembled Mike's. But right now, protecting Nora was more important than dwelling on that. I spoke to him, keeping my tone calm and steady. Here's the truth, Mike. Nora and I love each other. We've crossed the line. There's no room for you in her life. Those words were completely false, but he seemed to believe them. Mike stood there, stunned, unable to move. He stared at us, eyes wide, for what felt like several long seconds. Then, as if snapping back to reality, he suddenly tried to cling to Nora. No. Tell me it's not true. We can still start over, right? Please don't leave me. I swear, I won't lay a hand on you this time. Let's start fresh. His desperate, pleading face and loud shouts were pitiful to witness. It's not too late, right? Please, say it is. Mike says that, but their relationship had fallen apart long ago. Even as an outsider, I could tell there was no chance for reconciliation. Everything he was doing was pointless. Someone who can't understand the feelings of others has no chance of finding happiness in a new marriage. I don't have any feelings for you anymore. It's far too late. No, please. I'll do anything. This time, I'll make you happy. I'll give you anything you want, and you'll never have to worry about money. It's not about that. Our relationship is completely over. That can't be. Mike's face turned deathly pale as he slumped in defeat. Tears streamed down his face as he continued to beg Nora for forgiveness, but it was all in vain. Please stop. You're being a nuisance. I'm Tom's wife now. He must have realized that no matter what, he couldn't sway her. He glared at me and hurled insults. Not only did you look down on me at work, but you've also taken away the person I love. How could you? I've been suffering under your thumb all these years, waiting for the day I could finally make her happy. I had no idea that the junior I had mentored and cared for harbored such resentment toward me. I had only ever tried to help him, but clearly, he hadn't seen it that way. If he hated me that much, could he have been the one harassing my home? So you're the one who threw trash at my front door and left those notes, weren't you? Yeah, that was me. I hated you long before this, but when I found out you lived near Nora and she was getting close to you, I couldn't stand it anymore. Hearing his confession, everything made sense. Nora had only been kind to me, but Mike must have misinterpreted her actions. He had spiraled out of control, convinced that we were getting too close. So why did the harassment stop for those few months? I thought I could give up. But in the end, I couldn't. I couldn't forget about her. I could understand loving someone so deeply. But making the person you love suffer because of your own selfish actions is utterly misguided. If you really loved her, you'd want her to be happy. Forcing your love onto someone is not true love. He tried to maintain his tough exterior, but I think deep down, he realized the foolishness of his actions. The moment I said those words, Mike broke down in tears, collapsing to the ground. Afterward, we handed him over to the police, and the ordeal finally came to an end. Peace returned to our lives once more. However, our relationship as husband and wife would continue for a while longer. The reason was that I had come to know Nora's true feelings. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I'm sorry for dragging you into all of this. No, as I've said before, I don't see it as a burden at all. I enjoy spending time with you, Nora. I'm glad to hear that. I suppose it's time I tell you the truth. Nora confessed that she had been harboring feelings for me for quite some time. After Emily passed away, she had hoped to marry me, unable to let go of that desire. In order to bring closure to her emotions, she wanted to experience a brief moment of happiness by becoming my wife. I had never noticed her feelings for me. I'm truly sorry for taking advantage of your kindness. It's true that I was troubled by Mike, but seeing her apologetic expression, I took the opportunity to confess my own feelings. The truth is, I have feelings for you too. So, why don't we continue this relationship a little longer? Though I still had love for Emily, I had also fallen for Nora. I don't know if I'll be able to sort out these feelings or if there's still a chance for them to reignite. Even so, we decided to spend a little more time together to avoid any regrets. As for the journal Nora had given me, I decided to return it. Now that we had mutual trust, we no longer needed such a thing. 3 years later, Mike was released after serving his sentence. During that time, a shocking truth had come to light. The trash Mike had scattered in front of my house had actually been stolen from another property. That resident had been storing their trash in their yard until collection day. Mike had taken it without permission, and the homeowner had filed a complaint against him, leading to a series of disputes. Why do things like this keep happening to me? In his frustration, Mike hurled insults at the victim and even resorted to physical violence. After his outburst, it was clear he hadn't shown any remorse, so he was sent back to prison. Though Nora and I had filed a complaint as victims, we didn't want to escalate the situation, so we let it go after receiving an apology from him. However, we didn't expect that he'd end up facing legal trouble over something else. It seems his rotten nature was there all along. After being released, I heard rumors that Mike remained alone, never finding love again. He had, of course, been fired from the company, and although he found work elsewhere, he struggled with constant mistakes. Apparently, he'd become so apathetic that he was now under medical care. Meanwhile, my relationship with Nora blossomed, and we grew closer than ever. We often went out together, even taking trips. I had come to fully realize that I loved Nora. When I properly proposed to her, she accepted, and I was overjoyed at that moment. I want to make you happy. So, will you continue to be my wife? I'm so happy. It feels like a dream that this day has come. Of course, my love for Emily hasn't faded. I still cherish her memory. But I can't imagine my life without Nora anymore. Even though our relationship began under false pretenses, it's genuine now. I intend to hold on to this feeling dearly from now on. And I'll make sure that my love for her doesn't become selfish like Mike's. Please use this whistle and these boots. These boots have a reinforced sole and are commonly used on work sites as safety shoes. Also, this whistle here is designed for emergencies, so it's very loud. This emergency whistle is more practical than the one you're holding. So please use this one. And I only have about $400 on me right now. The man then asked, "Why would you go out of your way to help a stranger like me?" There was no real reason. Helping someone doesn't need a reason. In a time like this, not having someone you can rely on is one of the scariest things, I think. I give you a ride, but my car's packed with supplies for the shelter, and there's no room aside from the driver's seat. I'll inform the rescue team about you, though. Could you at least tell me your name? He slowly introduced himself. It was a name I felt I had heard somewhere before, but there was no point in overthinking it now. A year later, through an unexpected connection with this homeless man, I found myself re-evaluating my own life. My name is Andrew. I turned 30 this year. Walking toward my company, I felt the heavy, humid heat and watched the shimmering haze rise from the asphalt. It's been 3 years since I started working here. After graduating college, I joined a company in Tokyo, but the workplace was such a terrible company with terrible working conditions that I quit within a year. I returned to my hometown, joined the military, retired at 27, and then transitioned to a civilian job, a bit of an unusual background. I joined the military out of sheer curiosity, but mostly because I wanted to build physical strength through daily training and feel like I was making a difference. During those few years of service, I gained a lot of valuable experiences, and even though I'm just a regular office worker now, I'm glad I joined. However, coming back to civilian life hasn't been easy. I'm so sorry, I'll redo it right away. I lowered my shoulders in frustration as I returned to my desk, feeling defeated after being scolded by my boss, who always seemed ready to lecture me. I had been doing well recently, so this mistake really threw me off, and I ended up feeling down after the reprimand. Seeing my mood, a coworker patted me on the shoulder, saying, "Don't sweat it." I gave a small smile as I turned back to my computer. At this time, our company was preparing for an important meeting with a major client, and I was tasked with preparing the materials. I was chosen because of my extensive knowledge from my military background. But having knowledge and being able to present it effectively are two different things. There was so much I wanted to convey, yet I struggled to put it into words, battling with this task. And so, I ended up making mistakes and getting scolded, trapped in a negative cycle. Man, what should I do? To reset my mind, I stepped out of the office. I stood in an open-air corridor connecting our building to the next one, drinking a can of coffee and thinking. As I gazed at a band of thin clouds, my phone rang. I took it out of my pocket and saw my brother Thomas's name on the screen. After moving to Tokyo, then going back home for my military service, I've spent the last 3 years living in Osaka. This meant I hadn't seen Thomas or parents in a long time. They would tell me to come home at least for New Year's or the summer holidays, but timing was never right, and I often had other obligations. They understood and rarely pressured me, and phone calls from them were infrequent. So, I was curious about why Thomas was calling and answered the phone. "Hey, bro, what's up?" When I asked, my usually cheerful and talkative brother sounded uncharacteristically hesitant, avoiding getting to the point. He talked about recently taking up fishing, joining local volunteer activities, and so on. Growing impatient, I asked again why he had called. Thomas let out a small sigh and quietly replied, "Our father has passed away." I stood frozen, feeling as if the air had left my lungs. "Dad! How?" I shouted, and Thomas slowly explained the circumstances. Our father had died in the line of duty. My family was made up of public servants. My mother worked for the local government, Thomas was a police officer, and my father had been a firefighter. I didn't ask for too many details, or rather, I couldn't bring myself to. But I knew my father had fulfilled his duty. In a job like his, safety is never guaranteed. Still in shock and unable to think clearly, I took leave from work, boarded the bullet train, and headed straight home. Before I knew it, we had held the funeral, and the ashes had been laid to rest. Being back at my family's home after so long, it felt strangely empty without my father. My mother seemed deeply affected, barely eating and staying in a withdrawn state. In his photo, my father wore a broad smile, as if ready to let out one of his hearty laughs at any moment. Ironically, that smile seemed to bring my mother even more pain. Thomas gave a small smile. "Mom's having a hard time, but Dad always said he wanted this picture for his memorial." And actually, he found out he was sick just before he retired. Even to the end, Dad was himself. He put the safety of a young child above his own life. I've also sworn to put myself on the line for the safety of others as a police officer. Though, right now, Mom wants me to transfer to a safer position. Thomas had always dreamed of becoming a detective. He had long aspired to be a hero of justice. I remember how ecstatic he was when he finally received his recommendation for the detective division. While it's been a constant worry for our mother, I respect both Thomas and my father and wouldn't think to question their choices. Take care of Mom, all right? I have to head back to Osaka, but I'll make it a point to visit as often as I can. Thomas gave me a little nudge on the shoulder, saying, "Of course I will." The next day, he drove me to the station to catch my train. As I was buying my ticket, I noticed some commotion behind me. Turning around, I saw an elderly man who had just stepped off the train being greeted by a young child who ran up and hugged him. Watching nearby were a man and woman who seemed to be the child's parents. It was a heartwarming scene, a reunion between a grandfather and his grandchild. With that image in my mind, I boarded the train back to Osaka, staring out the window as memories surfaced. Suddenly, I remembered something from years ago. Our hometown was hit by an earthquake about 20 years ago. Thomas and I, both in elementary school at the time, experienced the quake alone at home before our parents could get back. We huddled together in fear as the house shook around us. Thankfully, it wasn't a massive quake. The house held up, and only a few pieces of furniture fell over. Still, as young brothers, we were frozen in fear and couldn't move. At that moment, our neighbor, known affectionately as Buddy, came to our rescue. He was an off-duty firefighter who happened to be home that day. Knowing us well and worried we might be at home, he came over to check on us. During the panic, I had accidentally stepped on broken glass, injuring my foot. Buddy immediately treated my wound, contacted our parents, and took us to the shelter, making sure we were safe. It was a moment I could never forget. That experience likely sparked Thomas's dream of becoming a hero. I, too, wanted to help others like that, but I wasn't very strong at the time, and my mother was adamant that I didn't pursue that path. So I entered the private sector. Ironically, the job turned out to be terrible, and when I told my mother I planned to join the military and move back home, even she had no objections. All those experiences have taught me the importance of being prepared for emergencies. The key is to stay calm. Panicking can lead to unexpected trouble, so taking it slow and steady is essential. Lost in thought, I soon found myself arriving at Shinosaka Station, and from there, I took a local train back home. The next day, a coworker said something to me. Maybe an earthquake will hit somewhere nearby soon. I recalled the strange, fan-shaped cloud I had seen that day. No, it's just superstition, I told myself, the kind of thing that people who like the occult use to connect unrelated phenomena to earthquakes. With that thought, I forced myself to get back to work. So, yeah, I managed to finish the task, but then my boss ended up crashing the computer. Physically, I mean. He tripped over the cables. And everything just went down, even though IT keeps warning everyone to watch out for them. That evening, I called Thomas. I couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease and wanted to hear his voice to calm myself. He listened, laughing at my story, and we chatted about random things for a while. By the way, how's Mom doing? She's still down, but she's getting better. Today, the parents and grandfather of the child Dad saved came by to pay their respects. Thanks to Dad. The kid only inhaled a bit of smoke and was able to leave the hospital. They apologized over and over, so I told them. Dad didn't save your child to be apologized to, he did it to hear you say thank you. If Dad were still here, that's exactly what he would have wanted to hear. He'd always been that way. By the way, have you done any disaster prep? Thomas sounded puzzled by my sudden question. Oh, at work, I'd been involved in some disaster planning projects. I'm in sales, so I'm not hands-on with it, but you know, things like reviewing hazard maps, preparing emergency kits, are you all set? Well, Dad took care of a lot, but I don't remember exactly what he did. Okay, then. I'll come back next weekend, and we can make sure everything's ready. Thomas laughed, wondering aloud what had gotten into me. If I were in his shoes, I'd probably be laughing, too. But I couldn't shake my coworker's comment that morning or the image of that cloud I'd seen recently. Better safe than sorry. Living in Japan, we have to recognize that natural disasters are an ever-present reality. Earthquakes don't just bring shaking, they unleash a cascade of secondary effects. Fires, ground ruptures, landslides, aftershocks, and even crime, like break-ins, can spike. When I was in the military, I once joined a disaster relief mission in an affected area. I learned a lot from that experience and came to understand how crucial it is to have preparations in place. My father, as a firefighter, surely knew this well, but it seemed Thomas and Mother hadn't given it much thought. Even though I told them I'd be coming home to check, they insisted it wasn't necessary or said they'd handle it. But I didn't back down and, as promised, went home the following Saturday. By then, my mother seemed to be recovering emotionally and welcomed me with a smile. As Thomas and I walked around the neighborhood, we passed the house that had burned down. It happened early in the morning, and the neighbors woke up in shock. Seems like it was caused by some drunk person's cigarette. It was a Friday night, after all. This family didn't even smoke, and their house was fully electric with no gas. Knowing that just makes it more heartbreaking. Thomas gave a bitter smile. The family was now renting an apartment while they figured things out. They had come by to pay their respects, but Thomas told them they didn't have to feel obligated to keep visiting. They weren't to blame for any of it, after all. And for Mom's sake, too. I keep trying to stay strong, but it's hard. I really miss Dad. Seeing the pain on Thomas's face struck something deep inside me. After checking evacuation routes, we stopped by an old noodle shop. It had been here since we were kids and had held its ground despite chain stores popping up everywhere. The noodles were still just as delicious. As I enjoyed the smooth noodles, I noticed a heavy-looking cloud outside the window. That cloud, it looks pretty intense. An earthquake cloud, maybe? Not a good omen. We left the shop, went over the disaster supplies one last time, and I headed back home Sunday afternoon. Then, it happened suddenly. A piercing alarm jolted me awake. Earthquake alert. Prepare for strong shaking. The AI on my phone blurted out the warning just as my apartment started to tremble. Fortunately, our area didn't shake that much, so the neighbors still had the composure to say things like, "Wow, that was a shake," or "That was scary." But as soon as I checked my phone, a chill ran down my spine. The epicenter of the earthquake was alarmingly close to my hometown. I immediately tried calling Thomas and Mom, but I couldn't get through. As each second passed, my heartbeat grew louder with anxiety. Though I couldn't reach them at first, as dawn broke, I finally got a call from Thomas. "Are you okay, man? How about Mom? Calm down." I snapped back to my senses. Yes, in times like these, staying calm and acting rationally is the best approach. Following his advice, I took a deep breath. "So, you're safe, right?" Upon asking, Thomas reassured me that she was okay too. "Thanks to going over the evacuation route and disaster supplies with you, we were ready." When the house shook, I woke Mom up. And we got under the table. We grabbed our emergency kits, wore our safety boots, and made it to the shelter. I had to help with evacuating other people, so I couldn't call right away, sorry. Relieved to hear they were safe, I felt a weight lift from my chest. But things still weren't looking good. Local police, fire crews, and the military are on site now. I need to get back to work, so I'll have to hang up, but know we're safe. Don't worry too much. With that, he ended the call. Even with his reassurance, I couldn't help but feel anxious. The fact they wore safety boots to evacuate meant buildings had likely collapsed nearby. While my family was okay, I doubted everyone in the area was as prepared. I'm going. Since aftershocks posed a serious risk, rushing there immediately wasn't wise. I waited, assessing the timing, and set out once I felt it was safe. Driving alone was one of my hobbies, and I was thankful I had invested in a minivan, even though I lived by myself. I filled up the gas tank so I wouldn't have to refuel on site and packed a portable toilet. Of course, the tires are snow tires, and I have a spare ready as well. After several hours of driving, I finally arrived in the area. Careful to avoid interfering with the rescue teams, I parked nearby. As night fell, rescue operations paused, and I watched as workers wrapped up for the evening. Preparing to sleep in my car, I suddenly heard the faint sound of a whistle. I strained to listen. A soft peep sounded again. Stepping out of the car, I followed the noise to what was left of an apartment building. There, I saw a man huddled on the ground. His clothes were tattered, and he was trembling with fear, likely homeless. Noticing me, he let out a small gasp. "Ah. It's okay, I'm not with the rescue team, but are you all right?" When I asked that, the man who appeared to be homeless gave a small nod. I didn't know why he was here, but leaving him alone was dangerous. I went back to my car and grabbed a few items. Please use this whistle and these boots. These boots have reinforced soles and are commonly used as safety gear on work sites. This whistle here is designed for emergencies, so it's much louder than yours. Use this one instead. And I only have about $400 on me right now. The man looked at me and asked, "Why are you helping a stranger like me?" There was no need for a reason. You don't need a reason to help someone. In a tough time like this, having no one to turn to is the scariest thing. I'd give you a ride. But I've packed my car with food for the shelter, and there's no space except for the driver's seat. I'll let the rescue team know you're here. Could you at least tell me your name? He introduced himself as Travis Morris. I thought I'd heard the name somewhere, but there was no time to think about that now. Ah, here, take this, too. It's some emergency food and a fan. It's hot, so stay hydrated and use these salt tablets to help you through the night. This was all I could do for now. At night, with limited visibility, there was a higher risk of falling or getting hurt, so I advised him not to move around too much. Thankfully, the building he was by had already collapsed, so further harm was unlikely there. It would be far worse if he tried to leave for help and ended up caught in an aftershock, with debris falling on him. That's why I thought it was wiser for him to stay put until dawn. The man thanked me repeatedly, so I gave a slight bow before getting back into my car to spend the night safely there. The next day, I finally reached the shelter and reunited with Thomas and Mom. A year flew by after that. Since our house was too damaged to live in, Thomas and Mom moved into my apartment in Osaka right after the earthquake. I had rented a 2-bedroom place because I dislike cramped spaces, so there was no issue with them staying. Eventually, Thomas returned home to resume his duties. Mom found a part-time job, saving money as she looked forward to the day she could return to where our home once stood. After a year, recovery was well underway. The town was slowly regaining its vitality, and many people had begun to rebuild their lives, thanks to support from all over Japan. At this time, I was actively coordinating with a construction company to plan the rebuilding of our family home. Meanwhile, I was gearing up for an important business meeting, wearing a crisp suit and taking deep breaths to steady my nerves. It was a major negotiation with a big company, and if we succeeded, it would mean significant growth for our firm. With encouragement from my boss and colleagues, I entered the meeting room. "The chairman is waiting for you, our hero." The beautiful secretary who had shown me to the room suddenly said that, causing me to widen my eyes in surprise. But the door opened, and I hurried inside to introduce myself. "Nice to meet you. My name is Andrew, and I'll be handling this meeting." My voice cracked slightly, and I regretted it immediately. "Well, hello there." When I looked up, I saw something that took me aback, a whistle hanging from the person's neck. I had expected the representative to be a woman around my age, but before me sat a man who looked to be in his late 60s or early 70s. As I tried to piece things together, the man smiled warmly and motioned for me to take a seat on the sofa. As I cautiously took a seat and looked at his face again, I couldn't help but blurt out, "Ha! Aren't you the man I saw meeting your grandson on the station platform?" "Oh? And how do you know that?" It was the elderly man I had seen in that touching reunion when I returned to Osaka after my father's passing. I have a pretty good memory, so I tend to remember things that leave an impression. At that time, I thought they were a family having an emotional reunion as I watched them. Well, to be fair, what made it stand out even more was that the older man wasn't fully Japanese and had striking blue eyes. Then, something else clicked. "Are you Chairman Morris? Yes, that's right. I had known that the chairman of the company we were negotiating with was a foreigner. Apparently, he had come to Japan with his parents as a child, gained Japanese citizenship, married a Japanese woman, and adopted her family name. But why? I thought I was supposed to meet with Ms. Natalie? I asked to meet you after I heard your name. I grew more confused. I thought Mr. Morris and I were meeting for the first time, but somehow, our conversation just isn't aligning. Then, Mr. Morris said something that connected all the dots. Back then, you used to call me Buddy, remember? The Buddy, that's what I used to call a man in his late 40s who once lived nearby. I never knew his actual name, but he had beautiful blue eyes. Wait, you are that Buddy? Yes, indeed. And it's so good to see you doing well, Andrew. I couldn't help but gasp. The coincidence was astounding. I can't thank your father enough for saving my grandson. As a former firefighter myself, I hold your father in the highest regard. Thank you for what he did. I was speechless. Despite having so many things I wanted to say and questions I wanted to ask, I couldn't find the words. Piece by piece, the scattered facts started falling into place like a puzzle coming together. Mr. Morris was the same Buddy who had helped Thomas and me as kids. He was also the elderly man I had seen reuniting with his family at the train station. And that family was the one affected by the fire. The young girl who had run to hug him was the very child my father had risked his life to save. Upon hearing about the fire, he had apparently gone out of his way to check on things. It seems we just missed each other as I was heading back to Osaka. Afterward, Thomas had mentioned the child, her parents, and her grandfather came to pay their respects with incense. And I realized it was the same family I had seen that day. So that's what happened. When Thomas and I walked around our neighborhood checking hazard maps, I saw the house that had burned down and thought how close it was. Now I know it was actually your house, Mr. Morris. Oh, by the way, about that whistle? I glanced at the whistle hanging from his neck. He took it off and placed it on the desk. It was unmistakably the same type of whistle I had given to the homeless man that night. But I was sure that man had looked fully Japanese. Although it was dark, his black hair and eyes left no doubt. Then, Mr. Morris dropped a revelation that caught me off guard. The man you thought was homeless, the one you helped, that was my son. We had been estranged for a while, with no way to contact him. By some twist of fate, we reconnected. After being laid off from his job, he found himself on the streets. He told me that a young man had given him safety boots, an emergency whistle, and $400 when he had no one to turn to. That same man contacted the rescue team, who eventually got him to safety. Indeed, when I had asked for his name, he had said, Travis Morris. Mr. Morris was fully foreign-born, but his wife was Japanese. When a child is born between a Japanese person and a foreigner, the genes for black hair and dark eyes are often dominant, resulting in a look closer to Japanese features. Since it was nighttime, I couldn't quite tell if he was of mixed heritage, but hearing his story, everything now makes more sense. While reflecting on this, he bowed his head. Startled, I stammered, "Oh." But he continued speaking in that position. "Thank you for saving my son. Although he's my eldest, he has never married and has no one to lean on. Pride held him back from seeking help from us, his family. But when a complete stranger helped him, he found it odd to keep holding on to his pride. And he reached out to us through the rescue team. Then, a question crossed my mind. Wait, I didn't tell him my name. How did you know it was me?" Mr. Morris smiled faintly and picked up the emergency whistle. Then, he gave a light tap on the bottom. When he handed it to me, I looked closely and saw small letters written in what looked like permanent marker. On it were the words, "Dad." There, in unmistakable handwriting, were the words "Family comes first," written by my father. Back then, I'd had a few emergency whistles on me and had given one to that man. I never imagined it was my father's keepsake. I had noticed it was missing but had assumed it was simply helping someone else, and that was enough for me. Still, a part of me had felt the loss. I never expected it would come back to me in such a way. Before I knew it, tears had started to fall from my eyes. "Although we were in different units, I knew your father," Mr. Morris said, his voice distant but kind. As a fellow firefighter, I had great respect for him. He always wore a smile, encouraged younger recruits through the toughest training, and was highly regarded by all. He used to say, almost as a mantra, that no matter what happens, family comes first. That's how I recognized who owned this whistle. His voice seemed to grow distant as emotions flooded through me. There had been times when I felt my father cared more about the safety of the people in our community than about his own family. And it made me feel a quiet ache. But seeing those words, "Family comes first," made me want to cry without holding back. When I learned that it was your father who saved my granddaughter, I was in awe. After leaving the firefighting profession, I built this company and followed a different path, but your father remained a noble firefighter to the end. I hold the utmost respect for him. This whistle of his has brought my son and me back together. Your family has saved mine not once but twice, including you. That's why I can't lift my head." With those words, Mr. Morris stubbornly kept his posture, no matter what I said. After he held that position for such a long time, I finally said, "I understand your feelings. So please, I ask you, raise your head." Slowly, he straightened up and looked at me intently. "I came here today to tell you in person that our company would like to proceed with this deal. With someone as remarkable as you. There's no other answer but yes. We'd be honored to support your company's efforts." We shook hands firmly. When I returned to the office, my colleagues and boss immediately asked how it went. When I told them Mr. Morris had agreed to the partnership without hesitation, everyone was astounded. The company led by Mr. Morris focuses primarily on landslide prevention, river projects, and road construction. With a former firefighter at the helm, they seem to put a great deal of effort into these areas. Our company, focused on disaster preparedness supplies, had aimed to strengthen our offerings by partnering with his company. With his unwavering support, the project was a huge success, and I was even offered a promotion. However, I turned it down. I'd decided to return to my hometown. Our family home is finally close to being rebuilt, and I feel like I've found my true purpose. Thank you for everything until now. And so, I left Osaka and returned to our hometown with my mother, where Thomas was waiting. It was almost unbelievable. The rubble was cleared, and new homes had sprung up as if the devastation had never happened. Our home, too, had been rebuilt as a single-story house. To celebrate, the family my father saved, along with Mr. Morris and his eldest son, Travis, came to visit. What a lovely home. It's warm and comfortable, just like your father. That one comment filled my heart with warmth. We had overcome so much to reach this point. Perhaps everything in our lives had been revolving around my father all along. After sharing stories, we made our way to the hilltop cemetery. The earthquake hadn't affected it, and our family's gravesite was undamaged. Here, my father rested in peace. The Morris family stood in silent prayer for a long while. My mother, now fully healed, expressed her relief at seeing the young girl her husband saved growing up strong and healthy. And then, with a bright, innocent smile, that child spoke to my father, resting there. "When I grow up, I want to be a firefighter, too." Thomas and I exchanged glances, then looked over at Mr. Morris. He was the hero who had once saved us. Inspired by that hero, Thomas had chosen to become a police officer. And it was our father who had saved the life of that hero's family. The little girl, now grown, wanted to follow in his footsteps, just as we once had, hoping to become someone who could save others. Everything really does come full circle, I murmured, and Thomas nodded in quiet agreement. "Nothing was ever in vain," he said softly. "The lives Dad saved are finding new hope in the future, and someday, they'll blossom. Nothing is stronger than the will to help others. There will be tough times ahead, but all we can do is keep moving forward." I looked down at the words inscribed on the bottom of my emergency whistle once more. Family comes first. Maybe, in that little girl, my father had seen the younger versions of Thomas and me. If something happened to her, her parents would be devastated. Knowing my father's gentle heart, he had likely been overwhelmed by that thought and prioritized her rescue. "Hey, bro, I think I'm going to try becoming a firefighter myself." The wind swept my words away, but I was sure they reached my father up in heaven. What did you just do? Pervert. Molester. She screamed and began sobbing uncontrollably, turning her back on me to hide her exposed chest. I tried to explain that I had only administered first aid after she collapsed, but she refused to listen. Before long, an ambulance arrived, and she was taken to the hospital. With red, swollen eyes, she shot me a sharp glare. "Just wait. I'm telling my dad about this." I stood there in a daze, watching as the ambulance drove away. Suddenly, I remembered I had a job interview later. Panicking, I checked the time, only to realize I was already way past the appointment. A woman collapsed on the sidewalk. Because I helped her, I ended up missing my interview. But even so, someone reached out to save me. My name is Steve. I'm currently in the middle of job hunting. Today, I had an interview with Moonlight Travel Agency. I used to work for a trading company. It wasn't related to the travel industry, but my job took me all over the world. During my downtime, I enjoyed visiting famous local spots, eating at renowned restaurants, and connecting with the locals. I wanted to work in a job where I could use those experiences. Moonlight Travel Agency is a small company, but their slogan, "Experience the world's most breathtaking views while you're alive," really resonated with me. Their customer reviews are great too. I'm sure the company will grow. I want to be a part of that. As soon as I stepped out of the station, the pedestrian traffic lights at the crosswalk in front of me started blinking green. I arrived 30 minutes early for the interview, so I had plenty of time. Everything's fine. I calmed my slightly jittery legs and waited for the traffic lights to turn green. Just then, a man in a suit rushed past me, looking panicked. The pedestrian traffic lights had already turned red, and cars were starting to move. Danger! Before I could even shout, the man was hit by a car. A scream echoed from a woman. The man, who had been driving the car, rushed over to the man who was lying on the road. "Someone call an ambulance," he shouted, so I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. One of the women waiting at the traffic lights called out, "I'm a nurse," and rushed to the injured man. Watching her take charge so confidently gave me a sense of relief. But then, I heard a loud thud behind me. Turning around, I saw a woman lying on the sidewalk. Her sunflower-patterned skirt caught the light. But it wasn't the time to think about that right now. Onlookers started murmuring, "What's going on?" but no one moved to help her, just furrowing their brows in confusion. Some people were even walking away, leaving her behind. Pushing past those indifferent people, I rushed over to her. I checked her for breathing. No breathing. No pulse either. "Excuse me, the lady with the pink hair. Could you run to the convenience store and grab an AED?" "Me?" The college-aged girl I pointed at yelped but quickly dashed toward the store. While waiting, I moved the woman to a safer spot at the edge of the sidewalk and began chest compressions. It was my first time performing first CPR. I had only practiced it a few times in training sessions. I vaguely remembered the instructor saying, "It's okay if you break a rib, just press hard." Feeling nervous about whether I was doing it right, I followed what I had learned. As I continued, the pink-haired girl returned. I checked the woman's breathing and pulse, still nothing. "I'm going to use the AED, please step back." The girl who had brought the AED quickly jumped away. Everyone else had already left, as if they thought they no longer had a part to play. I opened the AED and turned it on. Following the voice instructions, I pulled out the electrode pads. When it instructed me to attach the pads to her body, I hesitated for a moment. Excuse me, could you help me place these on her?" I asked the pink-haired girl, but she shook her head frantically. "No way, I can't." There was no time to hesitate. This was a life-or-death situation. I remembered that you didn't have to remove all the clothes as long as the pads were applied to bare skin. I unbuttoned just a bit of her pale green blouse and tried to place the pad on the upper right side of her chest. At that moment, my eyes widened in shock. There was a large scar across her chest. Was it from an accident? Realizing I had paused, I shook my head and quickly resumed the procedure. I placed the other pad below her left chest, and the AED determined that a shock was needed, so I pressed the button. It instructed me to resume chest compressions, and I followed the instructions. As they repeated it a few times, she groaned and started coughing. "Thank goodness, she's alive." Relief washed over me, and I sank to the ground. The woman winced and opened her eyes. When she tried to sit up, she seemed to notice her open blouse and gasped, covering herself hurriedly. Then, she glared at me. What did you do to me?" "Pervert. Molester. Wait, you collapsed, and I. Don't look at me." She turned away, sobbing uncontrollably. Quickly fastening the buttons of her blouse, she stood up. But she seemed to feel faint, and her body swayed. I instinctively reached out to support her. But the next moment, her hand came flying toward my left cheek in a sharp slap. "Don't touch me." Just then, the ambulance arrived. They were already loading the man who had been hit by the car onto a stretcher. "Over here." This girl collapsed too, but she just regained consciousness. The woman who had brought the AED called out to the paramedics. One person rushed over, asking, "Are you okay?" and glanced at the AED spread out on the ground. "Are you okay? Please come with us. We'll check you over just to be sure." The woman nodded quietly, but before getting into the ambulance, she shot me a piercing glare with her tear-streaked, red eyes. "Just wait. I'm telling my dad about this." I stood there in shock as I watched the ambulance drive away. Suddenly, I remembered my interview. Panicking, I checked the time, only to find that the appointment time had long passed. I rushed to the Moonlight Travel Agency building, but I was turned away at the door with a firm, "Lateness is unacceptable." Needless to say, I later received a rejection letter from them. A few days after receiving the rejection letter from Moonlight Travel Agency, I tried to move on and continue my job search. What's done is done. It's important to move forward. Today, I didn't have any interviews lined up. I decided to visit the job center for some career advice and stepped out of my apartment. Just then, a sleek, black car, clearly expensive at first glance, came to a silent stop in front of the apartment. That car felt completely out of place in front of this apartment, where the rent was only a few $100s a month. Was one of the residents related to someone wealthy? I'd never heard anything like that. As I pondered, a man stepped out of the car. When I recognized his face, my eyes widened in shock. It was Mr. Adams, the CEO of Moonlight Travel Agency. I had seen his picture on the company's website many times. Then, to my even greater surprise, a woman stepped out of the car after him. She was the very same woman I had saved on the day of my missed interview, wearing a yellow cardigan this time. Could she be an employee of Moonlight Travel Agency too? As I stared at them in disbelief, the woman's eyes met mine. "Oh, Dad, that's him," she murmured, looking away awkwardly as she tugged at Mr. Adams's sleeve. "You're the one who saved Hannah." Mr. Adams rushed toward me with his arms wide open. He grabbed my hand and shook it vigorously up and down. As I stood there, dumbfounded, he pulled a business card from the inside pocket of his jacket. "I'm David Adams, the CEO of Moonlight Travel Agency. I heard that you saved my daughter's life the other day. I can't thank you enough." He bowed his head deeply, then shot a stern look at Hannah. Hannah bit her lip before bowing her head as well. "I'm so sorry for calling you names and accusing you of being a pervert back then. You saved my life, and I didn't even thank you." In the ambulance, after I explained everything, the paramedics scolded me. They said I might not have woken up if it weren't for you. Looking into Hannah's eyes as she glanced up at me cautiously, I could tell she truly felt sorry. "I'm just glad you understand. Thank you for coming all this way to apologize and express your gratitude." No, Mr. Adams said, "visiting the person who saved my daughter's life is the least I could do. Besides, I have something to ask you. You had an interview scheduled with my company that day, didn't you?" "Yes, I did." "Are you still job hunting? Or have you found a position somewhere else?" "No, I'm still looking." "That's fortunate for us, then. Steve, if you're willing, I would like to offer you a job at my company." "Wait, what?" It felt as if a path that had been closed off had suddenly opened right before me. I've heard that when Hannah collapsed, many people just walked by and ignored her. But you were the one who rushed to her aid. Someone with that sense of justice, who can remain calm in a crisis, is exactly the kind of person we need. Please consider joining us. Please, I'm asking as well. It's my fault you missed your interview." With both of them bowing their heads to me, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. I've actually really wanted to join your company. So, I'd be thrilled if you would hire me. Please, I look forward to working with you." "Is that so?" "Thank you, Steve. We look forward to working with you too." I firmly shook the hand Mr. Adams offered. Beside us, Hannah let out a small sigh of relief. And so, a month passed since I successfully joined Moonlight Travel Agency. As I arrived at the main office and was about to head up in the elevator, Hannah slipped in right behind me. "Good morning." "Good morning, Steve." No one else joined us, and the elevator quietly closed its doors and began to ascend. Being alone with Hannah made me feel a bit tense. After joining the company, I was assigned to the department where she served as the senior manager. So, we were headed to the same place. While I frantically searched for something to talk about, she broke the silence first. Everyone's been talking about how quickly you're standing out in the department. The overseas travel plan, which had been stuck for a while, started moving smoothly as soon as you took over. We didn't have anyone knowledgeable about foreign affairs or languages before you. I'm glad my previous job experience is coming in handy. If we can also attract more customers from abroad to visit the US, our sales will definitely increase. You're really dependable. Hannah's smile made my heart skip a beat. She was like a sunflower, bright and cheerful, with a personality that lit up the room. Her presence alone seemed to make everything around her feel lighter. The impression I had of her from our first meeting was completely different now. While I was lost in admiration, the elevator doors opened. I regretted that our conversation had to end, but Hannah didn't seem to think twice as she quickly stepped out. "Good morning, Hannah." Several senior male colleagues hurried over to greet her as soon as they saw her. Hannah responded with a warm smile and a good morning. The senior colleagues, after discreetly pumping their fists with a quiet yes. I got to greet Hannah again today, began preparing to head out for their fieldwork. I opened my laptop to check my emails before heading out myself. The senior female colleague called Nora, who sat next to me, stretched her arms lazily above her head. Ah, another day out in the field. I don't even like traveling, so I'm terrible at putting together plans for inns or recommending nearby attractions. "Hey, Steve, can you go in my place?" "Hey, don't push your work onto the junior staff." Hannah's reprimand came swiftly, and the senior pouted in response. "Oh, come on. This is all about putting the right person in the right job. Steve's better at this, and he'll create a plan that'll make the ins happier than anything I could do. If you keep piling your work on Steve, he'll get overwhelmed." I couldn't help but glance over at Hannah. She was staring at the senior with a firm, chastising look. The senior, looking disgruntled, noisily stood up from her chair. Yeah, I'll do it. Must be nice for you, though, being able to stay in the office all day as the department head." I noticed Hannah's eyes drop slightly at the comment. I frowned at Nora, who was still sulking. There were a few colleagues like her who were frustrated that Hannah only handled office work and rarely went out for field inspections or business trips. For some reason, it was an unspoken rule that Hannah stayed in the office most of the time. "Nora, someone has to stay in the office in case of emergencies, right? That's why the department head stays behind." "I guess that's true." Nora sighed, then turned to Hannah with a small bow. "Sorry, I went too far." After her apology, she headed out of the office. It was about time for me to head out too, or I'd be late for my appointment. I shut down my computer and grabbed my bag. "Thank you, Steve." Hannah's eyebrows were furrowed slightly, her expression a little downcast. "It was nothing, really. I'll be back soon." I smiled, hoping to lift her spirits, and left the office. As I watched Hannah's shoulders slump, I couldn't help but feel a little concerned. Next week, we'll be going to Spring Rain Inn to preview their tour plan. Since it's a couple's plan, it will be 2 people, a man and a woman. So, it will be me and Steve. Hannah's announcement stirred up a buzz in the office, particularly among the male employees. "You're lucky, Steve, getting to go to the hot springs with Hannah. And it's for the couple's plan? So you're going to have to act like a couple, right?" Even if it's just pretend, getting to be Hannah's boyfriend? That's one hell of a perk. Although envious, my senior colleagues still cheered me on with comments like, "Good luck, and just don't overstep, alright?" It was comforting to know that everyone in the company was so supportive. But why Steve? He just started here, didn't he? Idiot, Steve's a workhorse. He's been killing it ever since he joined. Fair enough. But it's still rare for Hannah to go out in the field, right? This might be her first time, actually. Yeah, that's true. With that, the seniors returned to their desks. I couldn't help but feel puzzled myself. Why would they take the newest employee like me on my first field work assignment? And for a couples plan, no less. Could it be that she thought I'd be fine pretending to be her boyfriend? Maybe she actually likes me? I let my imagination run wild, and before I knew it, I had made a mistake entering some data. Thankfully, it was an easy fix, but I mentally reminded myself to stay focused. Before I knew it, the day of the site inspection with Hannah arrived. Given the nature of the plan, we were staying over a weekend, when couples were most likely to visit. Most guests drove to Spring Rain Inn, so we were traveling by car. Naturally, I was the one driving. Hannah, sitting in the passenger seat, was unusually quiet. Normally bright and cheerful, today her face was tense, and her lips were pressed tightly together. She even looked a little pale. Are you all right? Are you feeling car sick? I asked, trying to stay calm despite my growing concern, although I had been driving as smoothly as possible. Hannah shook her head. I'm fine. You're a really good driver, Steve. Thank you. Do you mind if I hold on to something, just for a bit? Hold on to. Not your hand or anything, maybe just your, clothes. Just for a moment. Of course, go ahead. I smiled, glancing at her briefly, and saw her let out a small sigh of relief as she lightly pinched the hem of my shirt. Her expression softened, just a little. But she had started to say hand. Did she actually want to hold my hand? Could this mean she liked me? Was she trying to use this opportunity to get closer? As these thoughts filled my mind, my heart started pounding. I'm driving right now. I need to calm down. But now, I couldn't stop noticing the slight tug on my shirt. Even though she wasn't touching my skin. Battling a sweet tension, I somehow managed to drive safely and arrived at Spring Rain Inn. The landlady greeted us and led us to the room that had been prepared specifically for the couple's plan tour. Since it was a couple's plan, of course, we only had one room. I knew that, but still, the thought of being alone with Hannah made my heart race. I glanced at her, but she didn't seem the least bit concerned. Her eyes sparkled as she admired the room, saying, "Wow, what a lovely room." "This room comes with a private outdoor bath," the landlady explained. "Dinner will be served here in your room, so you can enjoy it at your leisure. And since this room is far from the other guest rooms, there's no need to worry about being disturbed, no matter what you do." Her knowing smile made my heart skip a beat. I forced a laugh, trying to hide the heat rising to my face. Well, we're just here for an inspection. We'll bring your dinner around 7, the landlady said, before leaving the room. Now, it was just the two of us. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside was the only thing breaking the silence that now filled the room. "All right, let's enjoy the outdoor bath," Hannah suddenly said, starting to undress. I panicked and quickly turned my back. "Wait. Don't just start undressing here. Use the changing area, please." Despite my protest, I could still hear the sound of clothes rustling. She was still undressing. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might explode. Come on, Steve, hurry up and get undressed. We can't fully experience the couple's plan unless we do it together. Even though I heard her voice behind me, I couldn't move. Steve? My arm was suddenly yanked forcefully. Because it happened so suddenly, I couldn't help but turn around to face her. But she wasn't naked, she was wearing a swimsuit. A tank top and shorts. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I couldn't deny the slight hint of disappointment that lingered. With more of her skin exposed, my eyes naturally drifted to the scar on her chest. The same one I had seen when I saved her. Hannah seemed to be aware of my gaze, looking up at me with a tense expression. Her hand, still gripping my arm, tightened. I forced myself to look into her eyes. So, you were wearing a swimsuit underneath. You should have said so earlier. I didn't bring one, so go ahead without me. I'll join you after I change. She released her grip on my arm, still looking up at me. All right. I'll go ahead, then. After making sure she'd gone out to the outdoor bath, I took out my swimsuit from my bag and changed. Then, I headed to the outdoor bath as well. I was still feeling tense, so I walked carefully, making sure not to slip. Quietly, I joined Hannah, who was already enjoying the outdoor bath. The bath was small, and unless I was careful to stay in the corner, my skin might brush against hers. The sound of rustling leaves and the gentle flow of the nearby river gradually eased my tension. The warm water soaking into my body helped too. This view is incredible. It really fits with our company's slogan. Experience the world's most breathtaking views while you're alive. But it seems a waste to limit it to couples. I think families could also enjoy this, especially parents with kids who might appreciate not having to worry if their children get too noisy. There was no reply. I turned to look at her and saw that she was gazing down, her hand gently touching the scar on her chest. I hesitated, unsure whether I should say something. Why did you bring me along for this inspection? I'm still new in the company. Avoiding the topic of her scar, I brought up what I'd been wondering about ever since she'd chosen me. Hannah slowly raised her head. Because I thought you'd be okay. I'm aware of the feelings some people have toward me. If I brought someone who liked me into this kind of situation, they might not be able to control themselves. Though she claimed to understand how others felt about her, she didn't seem to realize how I felt. Feeling a bit dejected, I pulled my knees up to my chest under the water. Even I'm holding myself back. In that moment, I truly wanted to reach out, extend a hand or foot, just to touch her. I could hear the chirping of birds from somewhere. As a distraction, I focused my attention on the sound. You're not asking anything. I widened my eyes at the words that were quietly dropped. Hannah was once again touching the scar on her chest, and I realized that's what she meant. You don't want to talk about it, right? So I won't ask. Everyone has something they'd rather keep to themselves. But, scar or not, you're still Hannah. You're the bright, incredible woman who always lights up the room, someone I really look up to. I see. Her face flushed slightly. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I think I'll get out now. Don't stay in too long, or you might get dizzy. I quietly slipped out of the outdoor bath. I dried off, changed into my gown, and, before leaving, glanced through the window to check on Hannah. She was hunched over, her shoulders trembling. Seeing that, I quietly left her alone. After enjoying the outdoor bath, we spent some time exploring the relaxation room and wandered around the nearby souvenir shops and tourist spots. Hannah seemed refreshed, taking photos and chatting with the shopkeepers. By the time we returned to our room just before 7, we were ready to indulge in the dinner that was brought to us. Once we had finished and I had summarized the day's events in the report, I closed my laptop. The day's work was officially done. Good job, Steve. Here you go. Hannah, who had finished earlier, handed me a cup of the local sake. As I took a sip, the sharp, refreshing taste ran down my throat. For a while, we sat together in comfortable silence, enjoying the sake and some pickled snacks we had bought at a souvenir shop. Though we didn't talk much, the atmosphere felt peaceful and pleasant. Hey, Steve, why did you leave your previous job? It was a trading company, right? You're so good at your job. Hannah asked, her face slightly flushed, possibly from the alcohol. I was feeling a bit tipsy too, and for the first time, I felt like sharing a story I usually kept to myself. Maybe it was because it was Hannah asking. My older brother had already joined the company before me. We were really close. So I thought it would be great to help him out by working at the same place. But, well, I ended up being better at the job than him. The CEO took a liking to me, and my brother didn't handle it well. He started using his position as my superior to make my life difficult, giving me extra work, blaming me for his mistakes. I figured he'd get over it eventually, and things would go back to normal. So I didn't let the others know what was happening. I think to them, I seemed to be doing just fine. But in the end, it got to me. On the day of a major business meeting, I came down with a fever. My brother told the CEO I was being irresponsible, and that was the end of it. I was forced to resign. The sip of alcohol I took now tasted bitter, unlike before. Since I left the company, I haven't seen my brother. I'm too scared to face him. Even someone who looks like they have it all together may be carrying their own scars. That's something I've learned from all this. And this is the first time I've ever told anyone about it. Hannah looked at me with sadness in her eyes. From the collar of her gown, I could see a small part of her scar peeking through. She gently placed her hand over it. Since you shared your secret with me, I guess I should tell you mine. You don't have to, you know. But Hannah shook her head. Her expression became resolute as she looked straight at me. It seemed the alcohol's effects had completely worn off. This scar, you see, was from an accident. A car accident. My parents, they loved traveling. They loved it so much that they even started a company like this. When I was little, I often traveled with them, riding in my dad's car, going to all sorts of places. When I was 12, we were headed on a trip to the hot springs, the three of us together in the car. But on the way, a truck driver who had fallen asleep at the wheel crashed into us, and my mom. Hannah clenched her hand over the scar, her head bowed. Even from where I was sitting, I could see her small frame trembling. The accident hadn't just left a physical scar on her body, it had left a deep wound on her heart. I realized then why she had looked so pale in the car earlier. She had wanted to hold my hand because she needed reassurance. Ever since then, I'd been terrified of traveling. I had originally planned to find a job somewhere else, but nothing worked out. So, in the end, my dad hired me at his company. He made sure I could stay in an office role, away from the travel side of things. He's overprotective like that. And I get why the other employees resent me. You've heard them, haven't you? I nodded slightly, and Hannah gave a self-deprecating laugh. I'm the daughter of a travel company founder, but I'm too scared to travel. I got this cushy position because of my dad's connections, and I don't do any field work. I've always known I couldn't keep going like this, but I couldn't take that first step. Then you saved me. When I collapsed that day, it was because the memories of the accident came flooding back. I was shocked when you saw my scar, and I said horrible things to you in my panic. But you forgave me. You didn't ask about the scar, and you stood up for me when others spoke behind my back. With you, I feel like I can finally take that first step. I thought, maybe, if I faltered, you'd gently take my hand and walk with me. That's why I took on this job and chose you as my partner. I was terrified to come here, but I made it. I took that first step, thanks to you being by my side. Hannah's words filled me with a sense of warmth and excitement. But then, I noticed Hannah's downcast expression, and the excitement I had felt moments before quickly faded. This scar. I've shown it to others before. Especially to men. And when they see it, they start treating me like I'm fragile or damaged. Even if they'd shown interest in me before, they act differently once they know. But you were different. You're the first guy who's ever treated me kindly, even after seeing it. Hannah looked at me with searching eyes. Her cheeks still flushed despite having sobered up. Noticing the blush, my heart began to race again. But it's just your nature, right? You're kind to everyone, so it's not like I'm special to you. Tears began to spill from her eyes. I held my breath. Slowly, I moved closer to her. She didn't push me away, didn't show any sign of resistance as I sat beside her. Her hands were tightly clasped in her lap, so I gently placed my hand over hers. Hannah looked up, startled, as I brushed a kiss against her tear-streaked cheek. I kissed her to scoop away the tears running down her cheeks. That's not true. To me, Hannah, you are special. I want to treat you kindly because you're important to me, and I want to cherish you. As if a dam had broken, tears poured from her eyes. I softly guided her head to rest against my chest, stroking her hair gently. Then, she grabbed onto my pajamas as if clinging to me, and cried like a child. We left the inn just before noon the next day. I thanked the landlady who said, "Please drive safely on your way home," then got into the car and headed back. Hannah, just like on the way there, lightly held onto the hem of my shirt. But this time, it didn't feel like it was out of anxiety. Her expression was much softer now. The silence that filled the car wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. It was peaceful. As I focused on driving carefully, Hannah suddenly spoke. That inn, it was where we were supposed to go when my mom passed away. Huh? I almost turned to look at her, but quickly stopped myself. I could hear her chuckle softly beside me. That's why I didn't want to remember the trip. It's filled with painful memories. But thanks to you, I was able to replace those memories with good ones. Really, thank you. I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye and saw her smiling, her cheeks flushed with warmth. Suppressing the urge to reach out and hug her, I smiled back. No, thank you. I had a great time. On Tuesday, after taking Monday off as a day in lieu, I returned to work. The moment I entered the office, my senior colleagues crowded around me. Hey! How was the trip with Hannah? Got any pictures? Come on, show us. I laughed awkwardly, trying to fend off their questions, when Hannah called out to me. Steve, can you come here for a second? Relieved to escape the grilling from my seniors, I followed her. Hannah chuckled softly. Tough morning, huh? Who do you think is responsible for that? So, what's up? I'm about to go see my dad and report on the inspection. But I'm a little nervous. Could you come with me? Hannah gently took my hand. I nodded without hesitation. When we entered Mr. Adams's office together, he raised an eyebrow in slight surprise. But his expression quickly softened as he looked at Hannah, concern clouding his eyes. Hannah, I heard you went on a site inspection for the tour plan recently. Are you all right? Here's the report. Hannah said in a firm voice, handing him the summary we had prepared. Mr. Adams leafed through the papers briefly. Dad, I made it. I went on the trip, and I'll be fine doing more field work from now on. You don't have to worry about me anymore. When Mr. Adams looked up, his eyes were glistening. He stood up from his chair and immediately pulled Hannah into a tight embrace. I see. You did well, Hannah. I was overprotective, not realizing that you were growing and trying to move forward. I'm sorry. Hannah shook her head in response. After letting her go, Mr. Adams approached me and grasped my hand firmly. It was thanks to you, Steve, that Hannah was able to overcome her trauma. You saved her life, and no matter how much I thank you, it won't be enough. Truly, thank you. No, it's because of her own strength that she's been able to move forward. You're such a good person. I can trust you with Hannah. Maybe one day, you could even take over this company. Oh, Dad. You're getting way ahead of yourself. Flustered, Hannah blushed deeply at Mr. Adams's sudden comment, and with her cheeks puffed out, she playfully hit him. The room filled with bright laughter. As I soaked in the happiness of the moment, I resolved that I, too, needed to take a step forward. That Saturday, I went to visit my brother alone. He lives by himself in an apartment near his old company. But it had a security system, and no one answered when I buzzed the number I remembered. As I stood there confused, a resident approached, so I stepped aside to let them pass. Excuse me, do you know if someone named Keller used to live in Unit 606? I decided to ask while I had the chance. To my surprise, I was told the apartment was now vacant. He moved out about a month ago. I'm not sure where he went, though. After thanking the resident, I called my parents. As expected, my brother was staying with them. I hurriedly drove to our family home. It was about a 30-minute drive if I took the highway. After greeting my parents briefly, I stood outside my brother's tightly closed room. They say the president found out he'd been blaming his mistakes on his subordinates, and in a fit of anger, forced him to resign. He hasn't come out since. I gently asked my worried mother to step back and call it out, Keller. There was no response, but I could sense he was there. Keller, I'm working at a place called Moonlight Travel Agency now. As the name suggests, it's a travel company. And my experience from my previous job has been really helpful. Plus, I met a woman there who I want to cherish for the rest of my life. Things are going really well for me right now. Silence followed. But I continued speaking. What you did to me hurt me deeply. But I want to move forward, which is why I came here. If you feel any regret for what you did, please open this door. Let's talk, so we can both move on. Again, there was no reply. I waited patiently for my brother to open the door. Then, I heard a soft rustling sound inside, and slowly, the door opened. Keller, looking completely exhausted, appeared. Our eyes met, his face gaunt and worn. In that instant, he collapsed to his knees. Steve, I'm so sorry. I let my jealousy toward how the president favored you get the better of me, and I treated you terribly. Everyone around me kept comparing us, saying you were the better one, and I couldn't handle it. It started as small acts of resentment, but it escalated. Yet, you never told anyone, not even after you left the company. I don't expect to be forgiven, but if it helps you, I'll apologize as many times as I need to. Please, talk to me. I know I've been a terrible brother, but I still want to be your brother. Like before. Hearing Keller's tearful confession, my heart tightened. Keller, that's enough apologizing. So let's talk a lot, like we used to. He looked up, nodded, and wiped his tears, then invited me into his room. 6 months have passed since then. Now, I'm driving with Hannah in the passenger seat, carefully navigating the road. By the way, Keller just got a new job. Really? That's wonderful. Hannah was genuinely happy for me, as if it were her own achievement. That made me really happy. Oh, we're here. Just as she said, the inn we were looking for came into view ahead of us. The spacious parking lot made it easy to park, and I had no trouble getting the car in place. We were here again for another site inspection of a tour plan. This one, like before, was for couples. By now, it had become the norm for Hannah and me to handle all the couple-oriented tour inspections together. Since the release of the Spring Rain-Ins tour plan, our company's reputation had soared, with clients saying, "Moonlight Travel Agency really has the best plans." As a result, we've been getting requests for consultation from inns all over. Thanks to this, what was once a small company had grown so much that Mr. Adams was seriously considering going public. As we got out of the car, the scent of the sea filled the air. This inn was built right by the ocean, its main selling point. It even had a private beach. Hannah stretched out her arms with a satisfied smile. Then, in a playful move, she wrapped her arm around mine. "Let's drop off our bags and head straight to the private beach. And of course, we'll be wearing swimsuits. Hannah, we're here for work, remember? Don't get too carried away." I know. Seeing her genuinely enjoying herself, a smile naturally spread across my face. Everyone carries unseen scars, hidden beneath the surface. Those scars vary from person to person, and that's why you should never dismiss them or belittle someone's pain. You accept the person, scars, and all. And in doing so, healing can begin. Just like how Hannah had managed to overcome her trauma, she could now travel freely and even bare her skin in front of others. Something she once found impossible. If you can answer my question correctly, I'll do anything you say. I attended my high school reunion. Rachel, a beautiful classmate from Harvard who always had a sarcastic remark for me, suddenly hit me with a tough question. It was the kind of question that could only be solved with knowledge of French. She looked at me with a slight smirk, clearly expecting me, just a high school graduate, to fail. But I just answered, "I got it already." Then, leaving her stunned by my correct answer, I walked away from the venue. A few days later, she came to my office. On a circle with radius alpha, the central angle beta along the central line. Standing near the door on the morning commute train. I reviewed the material for next week's exams as the train slowed and approached the nearest station to my high school. Wow, it's a long line today too. After passing through the ticket gate and looking over toward the bus stop, I saw the usual sight, a long line of students in uniform. "Hey, Alex." "Oh, hey, good morning." The one who called out was Ryan, my classmate. Since we took the same train, we always ended up waiting at the bus stop together. Hey, Alex, I need help with a math question during break. Is that cool? Yeah, sure. My name is Alex Carter, a second-year high school student with exams coming up next week. So, if you set this part as EOB equals alpha, then AB becomes 2 alpha sin alpha. It's easier to see if you bisect AB perpendicularly. Oh, I get it now. Thanks. I go to a private high school that's far from home. My dad, who runs a food factory, encouraged me by saying, "Don't worry about tuition, I'll handle the scholarship repayment later." He wanted me to go to this challenging private school, even though it was expensive. Alex, could you help me with this English grammar question? Oh, this part? Yeah. I'm also stuck on this translation. Could you explain it to me? Sure, I got it. My classmates often came to me for help, trying to clear up any misunderstandings before exams. Oomph, always playing the helpful guy. Turning around, I saw Rachel watching me with a puzzled look from her seat near the hall. She was the daughter of a company president, a beautiful girl with striking features. She was also exceptionally bright, ranking at the top of our grade among the girls. You're lowering your own rank by being such a helper. One exam period. I remember dropping in rank, and she made sure to point that out. Well, I'm not as brilliant as you, Rachel. I believe her intelligence isn't something she was simply born with, it's the result of her hard work. I'd seen her studying alone in classrooms in the library after school and on weekends, out of sight of others. We were in the same class for both junior and senior years. She always tried to compete with me during exams, so I often just let her comments go, finding it a bit of a hassle. But when I became a senior, my father's factory started facing serious financial trouble. We might have to let go of the business. My father ran a small food processing plant. But the economic downturn had started to impact his company. Dad, I'll come work at the factory. Understanding the situation, I decided to give up on college and help my dad. Though he wanted me to go to college, he couldn't oppose it under these circumstances. With a pained expression, he apologized, saying, "I'm sorry." But I knew that everything I'd been able to achieve so far was because he'd worked so hard to support my education. Dad, what are you talking about? Thank you for letting me study freely all this time. Now it's my turn to pay it back. It's just that I'm starting to pay Dad back a little sooner than planned. When I said that, my dad shed a tear and said, "Thank you." What? Alex, you're not going to college? Yeah, I just want to get out there and become independent sooner. Oh, well, that's just like you. Go for it, I'll be rooting for you from behind the scenes. Thanks. I hadn't told my classmates about my family's situation. I didn't think there was any need to say anything about it. I wasn't looking for sympathy, nor did I want to tarnish my dad's honor. Despite that, my classmates encouraged me. All except for one. Alex, I heard. You're planning to get a job? One day, as I was walking down the hall, Rachel called out to me. What, are you planning to start a business or something? No, I just thought I'd start working and get out into the world sooner. When I replied, Rachel looked at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Giving up on college for a reason like that is ridiculous. That's something someone who hasn't thought about their future would do. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. Unbelievable. I didn't think you were this shallow. Turns out you're just another failure. With those words, she walked briskly down the hall. And so, time passed until our high school graduation. The words our homeroom teacher, Mr. Thompson, left us with on our last day have stayed with me ever since. Today marks the end of your high school years. You'll face many things from here on, but I want each of you to find happiness in your future. What is needed to be truly happy? I hope you'll find the answer as you grow. Listening to Mr. Thompson's final message, we all stood in solemn silence. For years after graduation, my father had an accident on the premises, leaving him unable to walk well, and I took over running the factory. Mr. Carter, what are you looking at? HM? Oh, it's an invitation to my high school reunion. Said my office assistant, peeking over at the invitation. Whoa, it's at a fancy hotel. And wow, it costs $200. Mr. Carter, can you afford that? When she asked me, sounding a bit mischievous, I answered with a laugh. No big deal. When I said I could handle it, she whispered with a small grin. If you need, I could lend you some money, with interest, of course. Oh, come on, I've got enough for this. Now get back to work. All right. But remember, I'm here if you're ever short on cash, she chuckled. My staff often tease me about always being low on cash. As long as I can pay everyone a good wage, though, that's all that matters to me. Thinking this, I pulled out my wallet and started counting the bills inside. A few days later, the reunion day arrived. I arrived a bit late to the venue, having dealt with a problem at the factory. Apparently, since many classmates were graduating from four-year universities and entering the workforce, they decided to hold a reunion before everyone started their new jobs. Alex, you're late. Sorry, I had to take care of a problem. It took a little longer than expected. Though several years had passed since high school, my old friends warmly welcomed me, and we caught up on each other's lives. So, Alex, I heard you took over the family business. How's that going? Well, I wouldn't say it's great, but we're managing. All my classmates had graduated from prestigious private or national universities. They had secured positions at top-tier companies like general trading firms, major banks, and securities firms. I was the only one among them who had started working right out of high school. It was true that I wanted to see my old friends at this reunion, but I felt out of place whenever the conversation turned to work. But you know, Alex, I was surprised when I heard you were going straight into a job. You had the grades to aim for a national university, what a waste. You're giving me too much credit. I'm really not that exceptional. That's right, you are giving him way too much credit. Just because someone's good at studying doesn't make them exceptional. When I turned around to the voice behind us, Rachel was standing there. She wore a dress with a bold neckline that instantly drew everyone's eyes. The youthful look she had in high school was gone, she had become a stunningly elegant woman. Oh, here comes the Harvard pageant winner. She definitely has a different aura than the other girls. I see, people from lower classes can only make such shallow comments. I'd heard rumors Rachel had gotten into Harvard on her first try and even won Miss Harvard that year, beating upperclassmen. And now, she was working as a secretary for the CEO of her father's company. Well, I have to say, you look pretty worn out. You could have dressed more appropriately for the occasion, this is a hotel, after all. Oh, you're right, but I don't own a suit. I don't usually go to places like this. Most of the men here were dressed in expensive-looking jackets or suits. I was probably the only one in a worn, casual shirt. Her remark about my attire only made me feel more out of place. Look, people can tell your lifestyle by how you dress, so in places like this, you need to dress properly. You make me look bad by association, could you stop doing that? Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Rachel had always been sharp-tongued in high school, but as a professional, she'd taken that edge to a whole new level. "Hey, Rachel, you don't have to go that far. Alex's family business is going through a tough time. If he can't even manage a small factory, maybe he just doesn't have what it takes to be a business owner." It was true, the factory was struggling. Maybe she was right. Maybe I just wasn't cut out to be a manager. Do you remember what Mr. Thompson said on graduation day? About what it takes to be happy? Oh yeah, he told us to find the answer ourselves. Ha, unlike you, sweating it out every day, I've already found my answer. Rachel held a wine glass, her confidence practically radiating. A top degree in this country, constant attention, and one day marrying the heir to a wealthy family, living comfortably without a care. That's what happiness is. Could you ever live like that? She looked down at me as she spoke. It was true, I didn't have a prestigious education or much money. I was just a guy working hard every day alongside my team. But seeing the dedication of my colleagues working toward a shared goal, hearing positive feedback from customers about our products, and knowing that I was growing as a person, supported by those around me. All these small things, they were what made me happiest. Come on, it's a reunion, let's not get into it. Let's just enjoy ourselves. One of our friends, sensing the tension, took me aside to another counter, pulling us apart. But Alex, you're the president now, right? That's impressive. My company's big, but I'm still just a low-level employee. Who knows when I'll move up? You'll be fine, Ryan. You're the best I know at rallying people. Before long, that talent will get you to the top. While I was talking with my friend, I heard some kind of lively exchange a little way off. What? I have no idea. Can anyone solve this? Oh, please, it's a simple problem for someone from Harvard. Should I make it a bit easier? Apparently, Rachel was hosting a game, challenging people with questions, and everyone around her was trying to answer. The evening went on, drinks were flowing, and the game grew even livelier. Hey, you over there, Mr. High School grad. Why don't you join in? Ha! Oh, but of course, you probably can't even understand the question, right? Her mocking tone directed at me made even the people around us uncomfortable. Losers should just stick to gatherings of other losers. This is a group for winners. Her words brought an instant silence to the room. But Rachel didn't seem to notice and casually muttered something in a foreign language. Then, with a sneer, she looked back at me. Oh, that's right. I forgot a high school grad like you wouldn't understand what I'm saying. My apologies. Even I couldn't let her mocking attitude slide, so I walked over to Rachel to say my piece. Rachel, are you asking people these trivial questions just to show off how smart you are? Not at all. I can't help it if I was born with this talent, can I? I'm not like you, so don't be bitter about it. Oh, here's an idea. If you can answer my question correctly, I'll do anything you want. You can ask for anything. So, how about it? Want to give it a try? She laughed sarcastically, taking a sip of her wine while looking at me. I responded without hesitation. Rachel. What? You went to cram school, had private tutors, wore branded clothes to catch people's attention, got into a company through connections, and will likely marry at your parents' urging. What value does a life dependent on others have? Ha! Ha, you're one to talk. You've only ever lived for others. Sacrificing your time to tutor classmates, dropping in rank because of it. Then, You took over your family's company for the employees' sake, struggling financially because of it. You've never lived for yourself. Tell me, what's the point of a life like that? As everyone around us froze in silence, Rachel and I stared each other down. But as fierce as her gaze was, I noticed a hint of sadness in her eyes. After a moment, I turned on my heel and headed for the exit. Alex, you're leaving already? Yeah, sorry. I let my friend know I was heading out and walked toward the door. Pausing, I turned back to Rachel. The words you used earlier, they come from a French proverb that describes a conversation falling into silence. With that, I left the venue. At the nearest station, I boarded the bus, holding onto the handrail by the driver's seat. All you've ever done is live for others. Her words echoed in my mind. Living for others, huh? Her comment lingered with me as I rode the late-night bus home, feeling a mix of emotions. 3 days after the reunion, Mr. Kensington, the president of Kensington Industries, with whom we were collaborating on a new product, visited my company. Thank you for taking the time to visit us today. As I greeted Mr. Kensington, I noticed Rachel standing behind him for some reason. She seemed just as surprised to realize I was the business partner she'd be dealing with. Shall we get down to business, Mr. Carter? Oh, yes, please. Mr. Kensington led the discussion on product development. And after about 2 hours, we moved to small talk. I brought my daughter today to give her some work experience. She can't do anything without my help, honestly. She's a real handful. As Mr. Kensington laughed dismissively, Rachel stared at the floor, silent. She hadn't said a word since she arrived at my company. My son will be taking over, so I plan to have her marry into a related company's family someday. Until then, I figured she could gain a bit of experience at our firm. I see. I nodded, glancing at Rachel, who was looking down, saying nothing. With our meeting finished, Mr. Kensington and Rachel climbed into a sleek, black luxury car. Well, we look forward to working together. Yes, thank you. We appreciate your partnership. The driver closed the door with a solid thud, and they drove away with a quiet hum. To think Rachel was with Kensington Industries, but she didn't say a single word while sitting beside him. I couldn't help but feel a bit of sympathy for her, as Mr. Kensington continued belittling her. A few days later, while I was working in the factory, an assistant called out to me. Mr. Carter, there's someone here from Kensington Industries. All right, show them to the reception room. I paused my work, wiped the sweat from my brow with the towel around my neck, and headed to the reception room. Thank you for waiting. To my surprise, Rachel was the one standing there. Wait, you're the employee from Kensington Industries, Rachel? She looked me up and down, as if assessing my worth. Even though you're the president, do you always dress like that at work? Rachel asked, half exasperated, seemingly unimpressed by my not-so-presidential attire. Yeah. Even as president, I'm usually out there working with the team, so I wear work clothes. After all, it's a small factory. I answered her with a laugh, but she still looked a bit doubtful. I brought the documents from Mr. Kensington. Here. Thanks. I'll look over them tonight. Please let Mr. Kensington know I'll need 3 or 4 days. Got it. Well then. With that, Rachel quickly stood up to leave. Rachel, if you have a moment, want to talk? I stopped her before she could go, and we headed to a nearby park. At midday, the park was mostly empty, except for a group of preschool kids playing with their teachers. We sat down on a bench. Hey, sorry about the other night at the reunion. I might have gone too far. I apologized for getting carried away back then. Don't worry about it. Adults don't get angry when kids call them names, right? It's the same thing. No matter what a loser like you says, it doesn't affect me. Oh, I see. After that, I found myself unsure of what to say, and we fell silent. I caught a glimpse of you in the factory earlier. You seem close to your employees. Shouldn't you be more commanding as the boss? Apparently, before she went to reception, she'd seen me working cheerfully alongside my employees. It's a small place, so we're close. Working together lets me get to know everyone's personality and way of thinking. And as president, I can't do this job alone. It's thanks to everyone's support that the factory operates, so I help out too. You're always putting others first. Alex, you haven't changed a bit. Rachel crossed her legs, leaning back with a sigh. Rachel, Mr. Kensington clearly cares about you, though. He keeps you close to give you experience and teach you. It's nice to have a parent who's that invested in your future. At my words, Rachel looked down, speaking softly. He doesn't care about me at all. Then, in a quiet voice, she began to speak. It's always been about my brother. I'm just an afterthought. No way. Since high school, you've had a great life and been well taken care of. But she cut me off, her voice firm. No. Not at all. Her outburst startled the kids in the distance, and they all turned to look. I was never important. I was sent to cram school because I couldn't keep up with my brother. When that didn't work, they brought in private tutors. I wasn't even considered a real person unless I made it into Harvard like him. When I told them I'd passed, all he said was, "Of course you did, nothing else." Rachel looked at the ground, her voice full of resentment as she spoke about her father's feelings toward her. I am a person my father has no need for. I'd never seen this side of Rachel. The confident Rachel now seemed so defeated. You can't imagine what it's like to be considered unnecessary by your own parents. No parent could possibly feel that way about their child. Oh, but they can. Mine does. To my father. I didn't matter, hick. With that, Rachel suddenly started to cry. It would have been better if you were a boy. Your father, the day he found out you were a girl, he sighed in disappointment. He was really let down. That's what my uncle said at a family gathering. Sob. Can you imagine finding out you were born unwanted? Rachel had spent her life with the knowledge that her father was disappointed she wasn't a son, believing she wasn't needed. Seeing her sobbing, I couldn't help but feel a deep sympathy for her. I worked so hard for my high school exams. No matter what I did, I could never get ahead of you. I topped the tests at cram school. Did everything I could to look good for the pageant. But when I finally won first place and told him, Rachel recounted their conversation. Dad, I won first place in the Harvard contest. Look, I even got a medal. Oh, I see. David, did you manage to get through to the American investors? Yeah, I got the appointment. We're meeting next week. Good job. Hey, let's grab a drink and catch up tonight, and we can discuss the details. Sounds good. He didn't even glance at me. I wanted him to see that I could be first place in something, too, that I could finally be someone he'd notice. But he never saw me. For him, it was always my brother. My brother is the only person who exists for him. Rachel sat with her hands clenched tightly on her lap, quietly looking down as tears spilled from her eyes. At home, I have no voice. My father's word is law. I have to follow his decisions on everything: work, marriage. I can't go against him. It seemed I'd misunderstood her all this time. She acted strong, kept people at arm's length, and showed such a harsh demeanor to earn her father's recognition. All she really wanted was her parents' love. I'm sorry, Rachel. I misjudged you. But Rachel, the reason you're capable is because of everything you've learned through your own efforts, isn't it? I respect you, and I know you worked hard in high school, studying when no one else was around. I think everything you've achieved is thanks to your own perseverance. So don't look for validation from anyone else. I think, with who you are now, you could find a lot to enjoy just for yourself. Rachel stood up abruptly, silent for a moment, then spoke. Don't act like you know anything. You don't understand how I feel. With that, she turned and walked toward the park entrance. Rachel! Come on, it's time to let go of your parents. Why not make your own choices for your life? Caught up in her story, I shouted after her as she walked away. She paused for a moment, then left the park without turning back. A few days after our talk in the park. Oh, Rachel. What? Rachel? I'm the new account manager here, so I'll be working with you, Rachel said as she returned to the factory, informing me that she'd be handling our account moving forward. Oh, is that so? Looking forward to it. Rachel, it must be hot today. Here, I chilled this towel for you to wrap around your neck, it'll feel nice. Oh, thanks. Since then, Rachel started coming to the factory more often, and she gradually grew comfortable talking with the employees. Huh? What's Rachel doing over there? Returning from an outside call, I saw her observing the factory floor. This isn't running well. Is it broken? Did you oil it? Nope. It's just out of oil. I showed you this last time. Come on, remember it already. Oops. Sorry. Could you show me one more time? All right. Let's do it together, watch closely. Rachel watched the exchanges in the factory with a soft smile. Oh, Rachel, you're here. Yes. Everyone here seems to genuinely enjoy their work, don't they? Recently, Rachel's expression seemed more relaxed. Oh, Rachel, you're here? We're about to have lunch together. Want to join us? We're having a lunch gathering today. But I didn't bring anything. That's all right. People always bring extra. Right, Mr. Carter? Of course, join us. All right, let's go. At my workplace, we have a monthly lunch gathering where everyone brings their own lunch. Rachel joined in, smiling and sampling the food while everyone laughed and chatted. One day, during lunch break, as I ate alone on a bench in the park, Rachel came over and sat beside me. Oh, eating alone today? Yeah, just for a change. Rachel, are you sure it's okay for you to come by here so often? You're not really tied to my company anymore. In my father's mind, I don't exist anyway, so he doesn't care what I do. With that, I was at a loss for words. Right. Rachel also seemed at a loss, and we fell silent for a while. I've been thinking for a long time about what Mr. Thompson once said, about what we need for our own happiness. I think I'm finally starting to get it, at least a little. Unable to stand the silence any longer, I decided to share with Rachel what I'd been pondering. It's not about big moments of happiness, it's about adding up small ones. I think that's what matters most. Small moments of happiness? Yeah, like watching a beautiful sunset, smelling roses along the road, or hearing a lark's sweet song. It's like cherries instead of a big watermelon, those little joys that add up to something bigger. Ha! You probably think that's a low-level way of thinking, Rachel. Small moments of happiness. Rachel murmured softly, then fell silent as time ran out, and we left the park together. One day, I was summoned by Mr. Kensington. Wait, what? You're ending the partnership? Shockingly, he told me they were temporarily withdrawing from our collaborative product development. We're not abandoning it altogether. We'll likely pick it back up in time. But for now, please consider it paused. But if you pull out now, we don't have the budget to continue alone. Couldn't you keep supporting us just a little longer? It's not feasible at the moment. We'll come back when the time's right. When the time's right. Sounds like we're done for. After 2 hours of discussion, I couldn't change Mr. Kensington's mind. Mr. Carter. What are we supposed to do? We don't have the funding to complete this on our own. I know. But we've already set up materials and production lines. We can't just stop now. As I explained the situation to the employees, they pressed me with questions, clearly worried. Oh, Rachel. I turned at the sound of her name and saw her standing nearby with a serious expression. Rachel. Couldn't you convince your father somehow? A few employees rushed over, asking her for help. She looked distressed, overwhelmed by their pleas. I'm sorry. I asked him so many times to continue, but he just wouldn't listen. I'm really sorry. Aren't you his daughter? If you just asked properly, he'd keep going, wouldn't he? Fathers listen to their daughters, don't they? Those words struck Rachel like a knife to the heart. Surrounded by employees, she fell silent, unable to respond to the painful assumption they'd made. Look, we're not stopping here. Let's figure out a way to do this ourselves. Fortunately, our concept is solid. If we keep pushing forward, we can make this work. Don't give up now, everyone. Despite my confident words, I had no real plan. Yeah, we've got the production line ready. Let's give it our all and see it through. Exactly. We've come this far, we can't quit now. All right. Let's get back to sampling and make the best product ever. You just want an excuse to eat more, don't you? Ha, you got me. But don't go eating everyone else's share. Their laughter lifted my spirits, easing the weight of my worries, at least for now. Rachel, could we talk for a minute? I led Rachel away from the others and into the office. Rachel, we'll manage to finish this. Don't worry about it. I asked him over and over, but as I tried to reassure her, she began to explain what had happened with her father. Why are you ending the partnership? Weren't you the one who proposed it? We're starting a new deal with a Chinese company. Joining forces now will give us an opportunity to access the vast Chinese market. But Alex's factory is already far along. You can't just back out now. It sounded like Rachel had tried desperately to sway Mr. Kensington, but he refused to listen. I understand your loyalty to your old classmate, but this is business. It's common sense to move to where the profits are. Investing in a small, struggling factory like his was never our priority. Once we got the technology, we planned to cut ties anyway. No, that can't be. Let's be real, that scale of a factory won't last long. Stop wasting your time there and focus on something bigger. Hearing this, I felt my heart sink, unable to hold back the wave of shock and disappointment. Sure, it's a small factory, but the people there work so hard. Dad, don't take their jobs away. When did you start letting your emotions get the best of you? I taught you to step on others if you have to reach the top. That's why you're still a disappointment. As Rachel relayed her conversation with her father, I slumped into a chair, weighed down by a mixture of anger and despair. Since I started spending time here, I began to want to see these people succeed, to see them happy. Since Rachel had started coming to our factory, her expression had softened, and I'd often seen her laughing with the others. I've made up my mind. I won't let everyone's hard work go to waste. I'll help too. Rachel. I'm going to prove to my father and brother that my Harvard degree isn't just for show, she declared. From that moment, Rachel started coming to the factory nearly every day, working alongside us all in product development. Mr. Carter, we're here. The driver opened the door, and I buttoned up my suit as I stepped out and entered the building. This way, please. An employee led me to a room where Rachel and her brother, David, were already waiting. After our partnership with Rachel's family company ended, everyone at my factory pushed through, and we successfully launched the new product. And a few years later, that product became an incredible hit, sparking rapid growth for my company. Today, we've grown into a business with 2,000 employees. Thank you for taking the time to come here today, David said, motioning for me to sit as he and Rachel took their seats across from me. Really, we should be the ones visiting you, Mr. Carter, but thank you for making the trip here, he continued. No problem at all. My schedule is packed these days, so I appreciate you accommodating this time slot. Rachel's father passed away 3 years ago, and her brother took over the company. However, he lacked their father's business acumen, and the company began to struggle. Their partnership with a Chinese company was also terminated from the other side, with the Chinese firm walking away with only the technical information. Hearing of my company's rapid growth, Rachel's brother approached me, this time seeking financial support. Understood. If we can be of assistance, I'm happy to help. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I don't know how to express our gratitude. As the meeting wrapped up, I stood to leave for my next appointment. Mr. Carter, as a gesture of thanks, well, if you're interested, might you consider marrying my sister? Rachel is a Harvard graduate. Intelligent and beautiful, as you can see. She would be a strong addition to your status. And I believe this could be a beneficial arrangement for both sides. This man had inherited every trait from his father. He was the type to use even his own sister to save himself. This matter has nothing to do with Rachel. If that's how you see things, I'm afraid we'll have to cancel this agreement. No, please, that wasn't my intention. It's fine. I'm going with Alex, Rachel said. Could you leave us alone for a moment? After a stunned David left the room, Rachel took a seat directly across from me. I've lived my whole life without opposing my father. I always believed that following his plans would bring me happiness. But Alex, thanks to you, I realized how wrong I was. I sat in silence, listening as she opened up about her true feelings. Every time I went to the factory, everyone welcomed me warmly. Even after my father cut off support, they treated me the same. It made me so happy. After you told me at the reunion that there's no value in a life spent relying on others, I started thinking about what true happiness really is. You once said, Alex, that you treasure small moments of happiness. Yeah, I still believe that, I replied. I want to find those small moments too, and if possible, I'd like to find them with you. Completely taken by surprise, I froze, unsure of how to respond. But I know I said terrible things to you back then. You probably dislike me, so I understand if it's impossible. But even if you like just 1% of me, that would be enough, she said, her voice gradually fading into a whisper as she looked down. Rachel, can you come with me for a bit? Ha! Without waiting, I took her arm and led her to the car. Where are we going? Just come with me. We arrived at the factory I inherited from my father. Mr. Carter, what's going on? Oh, Rachel, it's been a while. Sorry, could you prepare 2 uniforms for us? I started putting on the uniform handed to me. Ha! Here's yours, Rachel. Go change. Handing her the uniform, I encouraged her to join in, and when she was done changing, I gave her a towel and work gloves and led her onto the factory floor. Rachel, I'm still the same as I was back then. If that's all right with you, let's work together here. Oh. Yes. I'll join you. With that, Rachel tied her hair back, slung the towel around her neck, and ran into the factory, pulling on her gloves. Seeing you two working together like this, Mr. Carter, you look like a married couple. A female employee teased with a laugh, and as I wiped the sweat from my forehead, standing next to Rachel, who was working hard and smiling beside me, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness.